Charles Bukowski was a 20th century American writer and poet, known for his unfiltered, potent, and often crude takes on life. Bukowski was born in Germany in 1920 and then emigrated with his family to America in 1923. Bukowski had a horrible childhood, beaten regularly by his father, starting at age 6. As an immigrant from Germany, Bukowski was ridiculed by other kids for his accent and clothing, ostracized as an outcast throughout his schooling. Into his teenage years, Bukowski developed a condition that covered his face with extreme acne and acne-related blemishes, further intensifying his self-consciousness and isolation. The circumstances of abuse and loneliness imposed on Bukowski as a young child and adolescent laid the groundwork for his perspective on life and his desire to express himself as a writer. In an interview much later in his life, Bukowski said that his father was a great literary teacher because he taught him the meaning of pain, more specifically, pain without reason. When you get the shit kicked out of you long enough, you will have a tendency to say what you really mean, said Bukowski. In his 20s, after 2 years at college, Bukowski would quit school and make his first real attempt at becoming a professional writer, bouncing around the United States, doing short-term blue-collar jobs while writing hundreds of short stories. However, out of the hundreds of stories, only a couple during this time would go on to get published, and the ones that did found essentially no success. After a couple years, Bukowski basically stopped writing altogether, disappointed by the publishing process and his apparent inability to write well enough to be successful. Bukowski would go on to work various blue-collar jobs for several years thereafter. Then, in 1955, at 35 years old, after about 10 years of not writing, Bukowski nearly died from a serious bleeding ulcer. He survived, however, and then soon after, as fate would have it, Bukowski quit his job, which was at the post office at the time, and began writing again. A couple more years went by, and Bukowski would publish several pieces during this time, but still, nothing was providing much success, and he was forced to return to the post office of which he had originally quit. Counter to the original time though, this time, Bukowski continued writing while at the post office. Before his shift, he would use whatever time he had to write. Bukowski would continue in this for many years, getting a collection of pieces published here and there in underground magazines, all with very little success. With no real sight of success or money or fame or even just creating a living from writing, Bukowski continued writing nearly every day before work for years. Of course, we know how Bukowski's story ended. He's being spoken about right now as a writer. A renowned, successful, and important enough one to be spoken about with significance decades after his passing, to be considered one of the greats of all time. Bukowski, however, didn't end up becoming traditionally or publicly successful until he was into his 50s, many more years into the second stint of working at the post office. Only after a long, continued attempt at writing did Bukowski's work finally become noticed and appreciated by an audience, and only after a deal with a publisher who agreed to fund Bukowski's work did Bukowski begin to make any sort of living from it. At 50 years old, on the tail end of the traditional career timeline, Bukowski got his first real shot and took it. After it would seem like to many that it was over, it began. And he would soon become increasingly successful and famous in the literary world and culture at large not long after. It took Bukowski years and years of writing and toiling and trying to finally have circumstances work out in his favor so he could gain traction and find success as a writer, to get what he wanted since he was a teenager and fulfill what he believed his life was for. In this, it is at least initially perplexing that his gravestone reads right now, "Don't try." A message that seems rather grim, especially for a gravestone, as well as counterintuitive to his story. How could a man who became successful in fulfilling his idea of himself, a man who, although it took a while, found immense respect and recognition for his craft, all because of his relentless trying, how could this man leave the words, "Don't try," as his final offering? Arguably, perhaps this is where the most important idea can be found, not only in Bukowski's work, but in Bukowski's life. In a letter to William Packard, a publisher, friend, and fellow writer, Bukowski wrote, "Too many writers write for the wrong reasons. They want to get famous, or they want to get rich, or they want to get laid by the girls with the blue bells in their hair. When everything works best, it's not because you chose writing, but because writing chose you. It's when you're mad with it, when it's stuffed in your ears, nostrils, under your fingernails. It's when there's no hope but that." In this letter, Bukowski is referring to aspiring writers, but he's arguably referring to something much larger, the notion of purpose and success and creative endeavors in general. When you were, he went on to say, "We work too hard. We try too hard. Don't try. Don't work. It's there, looking right at us, aching to kick out of the closed womb." In this, Bukowski alludes to the idea that if you have to try, if you have to try to care about something or have to try to want something, perhaps you don't care about it, and perhaps you don't want it. Perhaps it isn't your favorite color.
There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke, and the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? Do you want to screw up the works? Do you want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes, when everybody's asleep. I say, I know that you're there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die, and we sleep together like that, with our secret pact, and it's nice enough to make a man weep, but I don't weep. Do you?